Hi there, welcome back. Let's take a look at some transfer stories in this morning's newspapers. The Daily Mail say that Newcastle are expecting to receive a formal offer from Liverpool for Alexander Isak this week. We'll keep you across that.
Right, let's get more on this now with Mark McAdam and a couple of other things as well. The main question most of my mates are asking me right now is how can Liverpool afford to sign Alexander Isak? Can you explain it to them and to everyone else watching, please?
Well, we'll try and make it quite simple for people at home because it can be quite confusing the way PSR operates within the Premier League. You've seen clubs like Everton and Nottingham Forest suffer with points deductions because they haven't basically abided by the rules. And people are going, well, how can a club like Liverpool go and spend huge sums of cash and still fall within the rules? And ultimately, PSR is all about your permitted allowable losses. So for a side like Liverpool, who turn over £614 million in their last set of accounts, they can afford to spend a lot more than a club like Newcastle, who turned over £320 million in their last set of accounts. Look at this. This is the net spend on transfers since 2021-2022. This includes the last 9 transfer windows. So it is a lot of spending over the last few years in the Premier League. And you can see Chelsea right out in front with 852 million. But they're, again, a side that generate a lot of commercial income. They have a higher turnover than Newcastle, for example. So it allows them to spend more money on transfers. You can see Manchester United right up there as well. Arsenal at 611 million. And you can see that the change in dynamic between Arsenal and Spurs and then Liverpool. Now, what's really important to point out with regards to these particular net spend figures, Liverpool's doesn't include the sale of Luis Diaz, which we know is around 75 million euros, so around £65.5 million. So if you take that off of Liverpool's figure, it means their net spend since 21-22 is actually less than Newcastle's.
Wow.
Now, the reason why it's less is because they're very well run. They're very clever with what they do in the transfer market. They recycle cash, which means they sell players, bring money in, and then reinvest that money into other players. They don't very often go and spend big in the transfer market. They always wait for the right type of player to become available. The likes of Virgil van Dijk, they spent big on him. Alisson the same. And then, of course, in this window, they've identified players that they feel they can make a big investment on that are going to have a massive effect on their starting 11 and their squad. For example, Luis Diaz was a player they signed in January, a number of years ago. They paid £37.5 million for him with some add-ons. They've just sold him for £66 million. So therefore, they've sold a 28-year-old, made a huge profit on him. And of course, that looks good when you look at the accountancy and the PSR calculations. So, yeah, so it's really positive stuff as far as Liverpool are concerned. And you can see that whilst they are spending a lot of money, they're also bringing in a lot of money. And you just have to look at this summer. Luis Diaz, 65, 66. Trent Alexander-Arnold, 10 million. Jarell Quansah, 35 million. Nat Phillips, 2.5 million. So already, whilst they may have spent 300 million, which is the top end, and including all of the add-ons, at the minute, their actual outlay this summer is probably about £150 million. Yeah. Incredible stuff. You can see one of those players, Luis Diaz, arriving in Munich. He left Tokyo last night. He arrived in Munich. He's completed his medical now before he officially gets confirmed as a Bayern Munich player. We know that his first training session for Bayern Munich is going to be on Thursday morning. He'll get officially confirmed Thursday afternoon, where he'll meet the media for the first time and go through that very first press conference. So, yeah, Luis Diaz leaving Liverpool, but once again, it represents huge profit for them. Really sensible, clever, astute business. They're very well run. And right now, the fans and the sporting director, Richard Hughes, and Michael Edwards are seeing the fruits of all of that careful spending over the last few years. It's enabling them now to go and strengthen that Arne Slot squad and do it in some style.
Yeah, and that's worrying for the rest of the Premier League.
No updates, it would seem, on Alexander Isak's future just yet. And Newcastle coach Eddie Howe has said that no formal offer has been made for the striker just yet. Mark Ogden and Beth Lindop still with us. Mark, why is there still no word on Liverpool here and their offer?
Well, obviously, we know that Newcastle and Liverpool are both away on their pre-season tours in Asia right now, and while business can happen, it's not the best time to do business. Lots of key people are, on the other side of the world. I think there's also an element of there's a strategy here. Liverpool made their interest in Isak, public a couple of weeks ago, not through official channels, but a kind of a tactical leak, shall we say, a strategic leak. And now I think the situation now is that Liverpool are just happy to let the situation just let it ride with Newcastle, make the uncertainty grow to the point where at some point push will come to shove and the Newcastle board, as Eddie Howe says, will have to make a decision. And in the meantime, this uncertainty grows. It makes Isak, is he going to push for a move? Is he going to get restless? Liverpool are going to stand back. There's 5 weeks to go until the transfer deadline, so they're in no rush. Obviously, they want the player in as soon as they can, but they're not in a rush to push this because if they go too quickly, it could become a long saga. So I think Liverpool right now are in a good position. They know that Isak is ready to consider a move. They keep hearing Eddie Howe say, it's out of my hands, it's up to the board. That to me sounds like the cracks are already beginning to show at Newcastle. Liverpool know that at some point soon they can make their move. The first bidder will be rejected, obviously, and Newcastle will push for a fee. But I do think that it's a game that's being played, and by the end of the window, Alexander Isak will be a Liverpool player.
It might not come as much of a surprise to you, Beth, that our defender on the panel, Stevie Nicol, former Liverpool player Stevie Nicol, thinks that they should be putting their attentions towards getting a centre-back instead. Will there be any feeling among the Liverpool fans that there could be too many new faces in the attack?
I think that is always the issue. I think Liverpool last season, there was a lot of talk coming into the season that they hadn't freshened the squad up enough, and ultimately they only added Federico Chiesa, who played very few times in the Premier League, and they went on to win the title at Acanto. So there is something to be said for having a settled squad, and there's a chance that perhaps too many new faces might it might take a little bit of time to gel. I think from Isak's perspective, it's sort of he's the sort of player that you push the boat out for and you take a risk for, and if Liverpool feel like the opportunity is there to bring him in this summer, then as Mark says, I'm sure they'll be keen to get that one over the line. I think in terms of centre-backs though, for me, that should be Liverpool's priority, and it is something that they are monitoring and working on. It was sort of they were linked quite heavily to Mark Gay from Crystal Palace earlier in the window. That he's a player that they do like, but there hasn't been an awful lot of movement on that the last couple of weeks. So it will be interesting for me. I think it would be a risk for them to go into the season with just Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate. We know they've got Joe Gomez as well, but he's had to withdraw from the pre-season tour of Asia with an injury already. We know he's not got the best track record when it comes to injuries. So I do agree with Stevie there, actually. I think while Isak would be great, and I think in an ideal world Liverpool would get Isak and a centre-back, for me a centre-back should be Liverpool's priority.
Ali, how can it affect a team having too many new players to gel with?
Well, you're looking at this from the perspective of Liverpool and the group of players that is already there. But think about the players that are coming in. Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak haven't played in the same team together. So that and that's just one pairing. And you think about Ekitike, and then you think about all the other players that now have to accommodate these new faces that are coming in. My thought on Liverpool, it's very simple. And it's along the lines of something that Stevie was talking about the other day. If initially you were thinking about Dean Howson, it's because you were going to address the center-back position. That was going to be a priority for you in this window. Otherwise, you would not have been thinking about that player. Now, that player went elsewhere to Real Madrid. And since then, there's been no conversation about a center-back and every conversation about all the attacking players. So why has this changed? Why have we gone from one end of the field to the opposite end of the field, dramatically so, and now there is very little conversation as to what the center-back position is going to be and who's going to be that player that could address some of the faults that Liverpool could potentially have in that position. They lack depth there. That's obvious to see. And so you're going to have difficulties in terms of the players coming in, playing together and actually finding the rhythm together. And one of the things that we appreciate about Liverpool is how well the group plays together and how they did so all of last season, and how the movement of certain players, it's already automatic. You know where this guy is going to be. You know where that guy is going to be. You know, because you've played together, because you've gone through things, because you've had experiences together. And all of that takes time. And so while I understand what Mark is saying about Alexander Isak and Liverpool is in a good position and so on and so forth and this and that, and they're not going to push. Well, If the priority is Isak, then they need to have him available so that they can work through some of these things before the season starts. You don't want to be doing this the first 3-4 weeks of the season where you're going through some growing pains, and we're going to have the discussion. Well, they didn't play together. They're trying to gel. They're trying to find each other's rhythm. And you're making the job of the manager more difficult as well, because he needs to figure out, where does this guy go? Where does that guy go? Where does this guy go? And I can tell you that there aren't enough positions for the amount of players that they now have available in the attacking half. So there's going to be some musical chairs going on at Liverpool, and Arne Slot is going to have to figure it out. And that takes time. And still, having said all that, they haven't addressed the center-back position. I don't know if I totally see the game plan here from Liverpool. I could see Ekitike or Isak. I don't see both of them. And now that you're going after Isak and you're ignoring what's going on back there, I think that could be a problem.
Yeah, and there seems to be a big pot of money as well. We've already seen Liverpool spending a lot, Beth. It could be spending a lot more. I wonder how the fans have been reacting to the money that's been spent in the past. There have been complaints that they've not spent enough.
We're never happy over in England, are we? If they spend too little, there's complaints. If they spend too much, there's complaints. But yeah, I think Liverpool obviously have there's been a bit of a departure from the typical strategy of being quite frugal in the transfer market. But that being said, that they're only able to do that because they're in a really strong financial position. The past 3 transfer windows, the only incoming has been Federico Chiesa for 12 million or so last summer. And during that time, they've got back into the Champions League. They've got the revenue from winning the Premier League. So in terms of PSR and financial room, they've got plenty of headroom there. And the shrewd decision making over the past few years has put them in this commanding position. And also, we know that Luis Diaz now is imminently going to be moving to Bayern Munich. So that brings the player sales under Richard Hughes, the sporting director who came in last summer, up to 190 million. So that's in just over a year's period. They've generated that much revenue from transfers. So that's why they are able to spend. And, I do completely take Ali's point about the disruption, I guess, to the front line and players needed time to gel. But ultimately, if the players that are already there want to leave, then Liverpool need to replace them. Luis Diaz pushed to leave Liverpool. He wanted to leave last summer. They managed to convince him to stay, but the club and the player were too far apart in contract demands and in financial demands. So ultimately they couldn't get a new deal agreed, and he decided that he wanted to leave. So they have to replace him. Darwin Núñez looks like he's going to be leaving, Federico Chiesa as well. And obviously, it feels incredibly unimportant to talk about Diogo Jota from a footballing perspective, because first and foremost, Liverpool have lost an incredible human being who will be missed so deeply by everyone at the club. But he was also a fantastic player and a reliable source of goals for Liverpool, who is now no longer there, very sadly. So they also have to fill that void as well on the pitch, if not off it. So as much as I agree that in an ideal world you don't have 3, 4, 5 new attackers coming in, if that number of players want to leave, then Liverpool have to replace them.
Well, I'm all for them bringing the players in, but give them enough time. This doesn't happen so very quickly that they come in and the second day, look at us, we're flying. No. This is what building a team is all about. And you got to give the manager time to evaluate and see, where does this guy fit in? Where does that guy fit in? And where do they fit into my plans? And how I want my team to play? That takes time.